Miss France scandal. Psychology behind the silence. The stage lights blind you, the crowd screams your name. The crown is placed on your head, and you think this is the beginning of a dream, but what if it is the start of a nightmare, one so dark that even years later you cannot say it out loud? Psychologists know that when glory and trauma collide, the human mind fractures into silence. And silence becomes the only way to survive in a world that demands your smile, while it steals your dignity. The scandal breaking out of France is not just about beauty, it is about betrayal at the deepest psychological level. Betrayal by a system that promised empowerment but delivered violation. According to recent allegations, as many as 10 Miss France winners, women crowned as national ideals between 1990 and 2002, were sexually assaulted after winning, their voices locked away in fear and shame. The contrast is unbearable. A perfect image projected on stage, and a wounded reality hidden backstage, a duality that crushes the psyche into pieces. Psychology calls this moral dissonance, the splitting of the self when the story society celebrates is the exact opposite of the story you live. Imagine being celebrated by millions, while carrying a secret that could destroy the illusion everyone worships. Victims in such cases are often trapped by what is called trauma bonding, their sense of worth tied to the very institution that has harmed them. They smile for cameras, knowing that behind the lens waits silence, isolation, and the unbearable weight of shame. Why didn't they speak sooner? The answer lies not in weakness, but in the psychology of fear of not being believed, fear of losing everything, fear of being blamed for what was done to them. Victim blaming is one of the most powerful silencers in human society, and beauty queens, idealized as perfect women, are among the most vulnerable to it. Society whispers, "She asked for it. She wanted the fame, she enjoyed the attention," and those whispers are enough to keep mouths closed for decades. When your entire identity is built on appearance, and that very appearance becomes the excuse for your violation, the dissonance is unbearable. The Miss France scandal, isn't just a story of abuse, it's a mirror held up to how culture weaponizes femininity and transforms beauty into liability. The human brain is wired to protect itself from collapse, so victims often repress memories, split them into compartments, and smile while breaking inside. This isn't hypocrisy, it's survival. Dissociation is a defense, not a choice. The silence of these women is not proof that nothing happened, it is proof of how deep trauma rewires the nervous system into survival mode. Imagine walking onto a stage where the crown is heavy, not with jewels, but with secrets that choke you every time you try to breathe. In psychology, this is called learned helplessness. When you've been conditioned to believe that speaking out will only bring more pain. This scandal forces us to ask, how many systems of glamour, power, and prestige hide wounds beneath their glittering surface? The crown on the head and the tears behind the eyes, this duality is the essence of psychological fracture. For the public, it was beauty. For the victims, it was betrayal. For psychologists, it is a case study in how illusions destroy human minds. Why do we ignore such contradictions? Because we crave fairy tales. Society prefers the illusion of the perfect queen to the reality of a broken woman. Carl Jung would call this the persona, the mask we show to the world, and the shadow, the truth we bury deep inside. These women were forced to live as masks, smiling symbols of a nation, while their shadows screamed in silence, unheard for decades. Trauma thrives in silence, and silence becomes its cage. The longer it remains unspoken, the more poisonous it becomes. But here's the cruel twist. The very system that silences you is also the system that depends on your silence to survive. If they spoke, the illusion of Miss France would shatter. And so the weight of protecting the dream fell on the shoulders of the wounded. This isn't just a French scandal, it's a universal truth about how societies prefer silence to truth, illusion to reality. And the psychology of denial runs deep, not just for victims, but for entire cultures. Ask yourself, how many illusions have you defended in your own life because the truth was too painful to face? This story is not only about beauty pageants, it's about families hiding abuse, workplaces silencing harassment, communities protecting predators. The human mind struggles with cognitive dissonance when the person you admire is also the person who betrays. So society chooses the easier path. Denial, and denial is poison. The women who stayed silent for decades are not weak, they are survivors who carried an unbearable load, because the culture around them chose blindness. But what happens to a person who carries such silence for 20, 30 years? Psychology shows that unspoken trauma eats away at identity, confidence, and even the body itself. Unprocessed trauma leads to anxiety, depression, insomnia, even autoimmune disease. The body keeps the score, and silence writes the story into your cells. Think about the cost. Crowns of gold that turned into crowns of lead. The audience saw queens. The women lived as prisoners. And here's the most painful part. We clapped, we cheered, we adored the image, and by doing so, we helped keep their silence locked. We, as a society, must face our complicity in demanding fairy tales that crush human beings into masks. The Miss France scandal is a crack in the mask, and psychology tells us that once the mask cracks, the truth demands to be heard. Trauma can be repressed for decades, but it always resurfaces, sometimes in confessions, sometimes in breakdowns, sometimes in books, like the one that finally revealed this horror. Now we must ask ourselves, do we keep pretending, or do we listen? Because pretending protects illusions, but listening heals wounds. The victims may never get justice in court, but psychology teaches us that justice begins with being heard, being believed, being seen. This scandal is not only about beauty queens, it's about every woman silenced, every voice buried, every trauma disguised by a smile. And the psychology of silence demands that we, as a culture, stop punishing truth-tellers and start punishing predators. The real scandal is not just the abuse. It is the decades of silence, and the culture that demanded it. Psychology reveals that secrets thrive when shame is weaponized. The antidote is courage, community, and breaking the silence. So let me ask you directly, how many secrets are you carrying right now, locked behind your smile? What have you buried so deep that the world thinks you are fine, while inside you are breaking? The Miss France story is not distant, it is every one of us who has ever hidden pain to keep others comfortable. And if you feel that sting in your chest, it means your shadow is calling too. Trauma unites us, silence divides us, and truth heals us. The psychology of this scandal is brutal, but it's also liberating. Once secrets are exposed, they lose their power. We owe it to every victim, past, present, and future, to stop demanding smiles and start demanding truth. So here is my challenge to you. Stop pretending, stop excusing, stop hiding. Comment one word brave if you are ready to break the silence. And subscribe Healing with Surgery Guru, because here we tear down illusions, expose the lies, and reveal the psychology behind the scandals society wants you to ignore.